but analogy. You can also try this one-handed. What you should be feeling being stretched is an open in your hips and ribs, and this is an arm strengthening pose and a great balancing pose. The Sanskrit name for this is please don't judge me if I pronounce this wrong, but Adho Mukha Savasana. The next pose is Wild Thing, or the Sanskrit name is Kamatkarasana. And so to transition this pose from downward dog, you would first inhale and lift the right leg, coming to downward dog split. Then you would open the right hip toward the ceiling and bend the right knee. Continue opening the hip and begin pivoting on the ball of the left foot to bring yourself into position for a back bend. You would then exhale as the hips come to face the ceiling. Bring the right foot to the floor, this time on the outside of and parallel to the left foot. The right arm comes off the floor and stretches to the front of the room. You inhale while you do this. To come out, pivot on the ball of the left foot and drop the right arm to return to downward dog. But in this case, you would go straight into wheel. But for Wild Thing, what you would be stretching or feeling, you would be opening your chest, lungs, and shoulder areas. The opens the front of the legs and hips, and it builds strength in your shoulder and your upper back. This is a great arm balance and chest opener. So after Wild Thing, you would move into Wheel. For Wheel, the Sanskrit name is, okay, please don't judge me if I pronounce this wrong, but it is Urdhva Dhanurasana, or, okay, upward bow. And to transition this pose from downward dog, you would first go into downward dog, and then you transition and follow the steps into Wild Thing. And from Wild Thing, you would place your right hand down on the mat facing the front of the room. You should be facing the front of the room and your body in a half circle pose or in an upward bow pose, in other words, the wheel pose. During this pose, you should breathe slowly through your nostrils. What you should be feeling stretched in this pose is your chest and spine should be opening, and your hips and the tops of your thighs should open as well. This improves your spinal flexibility and stretches the shoulders and chest. This also strengthens your arms. You should, however, not feel compression in the neck or skull, and if you do, then you are doing this pose completely wrong, and you should stop. Some modifications and adjustments. For beginners, you can take the hands a little wider when you're doing the pose. For advanced, you can lift one leg at a time straight up to the ceiling and come into an upside down standing pose. And then after wheel pose, you would go back into Wild Thing and straight into three-legged dog.
Next, we have upward dog. The Sanskrit name for upward dog is Urdhva Mukha Asana. To do upward dog, lie prone on the floor. Stretch your legs back with the tops of your feet on the floor. Bend your elbows and spread your palms on the floor beside your waist so that your forearms are relatively perpendicular to the floor. Inhale and press your inner hands firmly into the floor and slightly back as if you were trying to push yourself forward along the floor. Then straighten your arms and simultaneously lift your torso up and your legs a few inches off the floor on an inhalation. Keep the thighs firm and slightly turned inward, the arms firm and turned out so the elbow creases face forward. Press the tailbone toward the pubis and lift the pubis towards the navel. Narrow the hip points, firm but don't harden the buttocks. Firm the shoulder blades against the back and puff the side ribs forward. Lift through the top of the sternum, but avoid pushing the front ribs forward. which only hardens the lower back. Look straight ahead or tip the head back slightly, but take care not to compress the back of the neck and harden the throat. To deepen this pose, or to increase the strength and lightness of this pose, push from the backs of your knees along the calves and out through the heels. The tops of your feet will press more firmly against the floor. As they do, lift the top sternum up and forward. What you should feel during this stretch is improving your posture. It should strengthen your spine, arms, and wrists. It should stretch your chest and lungs, shoulders, and abdomen. You should feel it firm in the buttocks.
So, child's pose, or for the Sanskrit name Balasana, the transition from downward dog, you would drop your knees to the floor, spread your knees as wide as the mat, keeping the big toes touching, and bring the belly to rest between the thighs and the forehead to the floor. In the pose, you would inhale and exhale while closing your eyes or looking at the mat. Some modifications you can do is you can either stretch your arms in front of you with the palms toward the floor, or bring the arms back alongside the thighs with the palms facing upwards. Some stretches you would feel in this pose is a gentle stretch from the hips, thighs, and ankles.